They say blood is thicker than water, but they never tell you how easily it can drown you. I used to believe that family was a sanctuary, a circle of unconditional love where you could run when the rest of the world turned cold. I spent 34 years of my life operating under that beautiful, naive delusion. I looked at my parents, Arthur and Eleanor, and saw pillars of strength, the architects of my safety. When my husband, David, passed away 5 years ago, leaving me to raise our beautiful daughter, Maya, it was my parents who held my shaking hands. They wept with me, wrapped their arms around Maya, and promised that we would never face the darkness alone. But looking back, I realized the darkness wasn't waiting for us in the outside world. It was sitting right across from us at the Sunday dinner table, smiling warmly while calculating the price of our betrayal. Maya was only 5 when David left us. He was a brilliant man, an accountant who possessed a rare, analytical mind and a heart of pure gold. He knew his time on this earth might be short due to a congenital heart condition, though he always prayed we'd have decades together. Because of his meticulous nature, David spent his final months ensuring that Maya's future would be flawless. He didn't just leave behind standard life insurance. He spent years quietly investing, securing properties, and establishing a highly structured, locked trust fund. It was a multi-million-dollar legacy meant to ensure that our daughter would never have to compromise on her education, her dreams, or her security. "This is for Maya," David had whispered to me on his final night in the hospital, his hand weak but his eyes fiercely intense. "No matter what happens to me, Clara, she will be protected. The legal structures are airtight. Promise me you'll keep the physical record safe. The world can be greedy, and people change when they smell wealth." I wept, kissing his forehead, and promised him. I thought he was just expressing the standard anxieties of a dying father. I never imagined that the predatory eyes he was implicitly warning me about belonged to the very people who gave me life. After David passed, the grief was a heavy, suffocating blanket. In those initial, agonizing months, my parents were constantly there. They moved into my guest room for a while, cooking meals, driving Maya to school, and managing the daily chaos I was too broken to handle. I felt a profound sense of gratitude. I told myself I was the luckiest woman alive to have such devoted parents. When they suggested that we store David's extensive physical financial ledgers, legal documents, and personal journals in the secure, climate-controlled basement of their large suburban home, it felt like a perfectly logical, loving offer. "Your house has that old plumbing issue, Clara darling," my mother, Eleanor, had said, her voice dripping with maternal concern as she smoothed down my hair. "If a pipe bursts, David's precious papers could be ruined forever. Let Arthur put them in our home safe. It's fireproof, waterproof, and completely secure. You have enough on your plate, just trying to breathe again." My father, Arthur, nodded solemnly, his face a mask of paternal dependability. "She's right, sweetie. Let me take the heavy lifting off your shoulders. We'll keep Maya's future under lock and key. You just focus on healing." I handed over the keys to the heavy metal lockboxes containing the original trust deeds, the bearer bonds, and the detailed property ledgers that David had meticulously maintained. I handed them over with a smile and a sigh of relief. I felt lighter. I felt safe. For 5 years, life fell into a gentle, predictable rhythm. Maya grew into a vibrant, brilliant 10-year-old girl with her father's quick wit and analytical mind. She loved coding, she loved reading, and she possessed a deep, soulful empathy that constantly reminded me of David. Every Sunday, we went to my parents' house for dinner. It was a tradition, but over the past year, I noticed a subtle shift in my parents' behavior. They had always lived comfortably, but suddenly, they began talking incessantly about their social standing. They joined an elite, wildly expensive country club. They started rubbing shoulders with high society couples, people whose wealth far eclipsed my parents' retired income. My mother began dropping hints about how their house felt outdated compared to her new friends' mansions. "The Harrisons just installed a state-of-the-art home theater, Clara," my mother remarked one evening, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of envy and ambition as she sipped her wine. "It cost nearly $80,000. It has custom leather recliners, a commercial-grade projector, and acoustic walls. It's magnificent. Your father and I feel so left behind in our old living room. We deserve a little luxury in our golden years, don't we? You have a beautiful home, Mom, I said gently, helping her clear the dinner dishes. And you live very comfortably. Don't compare yourself to the Harrisons. She sniffed, a sharp, cold sound that fell out of character. It's easy for you to say. You're set for life, thanks to David's planning. But your father and I, we have to watch every penny. It's exhausting trying to maintain appearances. I felt a slight pang of discomfort, but I brushed it off. People get insecure as they age. It was human nature. I didn't think much more about it until 3 weeks later, when I pulled up to my parents' house on a Tuesday afternoon to drop off some groceries my mother had asked for. As I walked up the driveway, I was startled by the sight of a massive commercial construction van parked outside. 2 men in overalls were unloading heavy crates filled with high-end electronic equipment, massive audio speakers, and luxurious leather seating. I walked through the unlocked front door and followed the sound of hammering and loud, excited voices coming from the basement. When I stepped down the stairs, my jaw dropped. The basement, the place where my parents had once spent quiet evenings reading, the place where Maya's inheritance documents were supposed to be securely locked away, had been completely gutted. The old walls were gone, replaced by expensive acoustic paneling. A massive cinematic screen was being mounted on the far wall. A raised platform was being built for rows of plush, electronic reclining seats. It looked like a commercial VIP cinema. My mother was standing in the center of the room, holding a clipboard and directing the workers with the air of a wealthy socialite. My father was next to her, beaming as he ran his hand over a top-of-the-line digital projector. "Mom? Dad?" I called out, my voice echoing slightly over the sound of a power drill. "What is all this?" My mother spun around, her face instantly tightening. For a fleeting second, a look of pure panic crossed her features, so fast I almost missed it. But just as quickly, she smoothed her expression into a wide, theatrical smile. "Clara, darling, what a surprise!" she exclaimed, walking over to block my view of the back corner of the room. "We weren't expecting you today. I brought the groceries you asked for," I said, looking around the room in absolute bewilderment. "But what is going on here? You completely remodeled the basement? Last month, you said you couldn't afford to fix the roof gutters, and now you're building a luxury home theater? Where did you get the money for this? This must cost a fortune." My father stepped forward, clearing his throat nervously, his eyes avoiding mine. "Well, Clara, your mother and I managed to liquidate some old investments. Some stocks we forgot we even had. We realized life is short, and we wanted to enjoy ourselves." "Liquidated investments?" I echoed, a strange, hollow feeling starting to form in the pit of my stomach. "You told me your portfolio was entirely tied up in fixed annuities that you couldn't touch without massive penalties." "Things change, Clara," my mother interrupted sharply, her tone suddenly defensive, almost aggressive. "We don't need to explain our personal finances to our daughter. We worked hard our whole lives. We deserve this theater. It's going to be the centerpiece for our country club hosting events." I held up my hands, tried to de-escalate the tension. "Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry. It's your money, of course. I was just surprised." I paused, my eyes scanning the room, searching for the heavy, fireproof iron safe that used to sit in the far closet, the safe that held my daughter's future. "By the way, where did you move the safe? The one with Maya's trust documents and David's ledgers? I assume you had to move it out of the basement for the construction." My father completely froze. He froze so rigidly that the clipboard in my mother's hand rattled slightly. The silence that stretched between us became heavy, suffocating, and terrifyingly cold. "The safe?" my mother repeated, her voice cracking slightly before she forced a brittle laugh. "Oh, it's locked away securely in the garage loft, covered in tarps. Don't worry about it, Clara. It's perfectly safe. Now come upstairs. Let's look at those groceries." She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly tight, almost desperate, steering me away from the basement stairs. But as she pulled me away, a cold dread washed over me. My mother was a terrible liar when she was caught off guard. Her eyes were darting, her skin was pale, and my father couldn't even look me in the eye. But what I didn't know that day was that the luxury home theater wasn't paid for by forgotten investments. It was paid for by my daughter's future. The unease didn't leave me. It stayed with me, a sharp, icy needle pricking at my mind every single hour of the day. Call it intuition, call it a mother's instinct, but I knew something was profoundly wrong. The image of my father's guilty face and my mother's forced, desperate laughter haunted my sleepless nights. The next morning, while Maya was at school, I decided to drive back to my parents' house. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was disrespecting the people who had supported me through my worst grief. But David's dying words echoed in my mind. The world can be greedy, and people change when they smell wealth. I arrived at the house at 10 a.m. My parents' car was gone. I knew they had an all-day charity golf tournament at their new country club. I had an emergency spare key to their house, which they had given me years ago. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird as I unlocked the front door and stepped into the quiet, silent house. I didn't go to the kitchen. I didn't go to the garage loft. I walked straight down into the newly constructed basement theater. The workers weren't there today. The room smelled of fresh paint, expensive leather, and sawdust. I walked to the back corner where the deep closet used to be. It had been replaced by custom mahogany cabinetry, housing high-end audio receivers. I walked out to the garage and climbed the rickety wooden ladder to the loft. I searched through the dusty boxes, moving old lawn chairs and holiday decorations. There was no safe. There were no tarps covering a heavy metal box. The safe was completely gone. Panic, raw and suffocating, seized my throat. I ran back inside the house, heading upstairs to my father's home office. I began frantically opening desk drawers, searching for any paperwork, any clue. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the files. I felt dirty, like a thief in my own parents' home, but the desperation driving me was entirely consuming. Then, in the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet, hidden beneath a stack of old tax returns, I found a manila folder labeled with Maya's name. My breath caught. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were copies of David's original trust documents, but clipped to them were recent financial statements, liquidation notices, and correspondence with a private, offshore financial entity. As I read through the documents, the room began to spin. The air left my lungs, and I fell to my knees on the hardwood floor, the papers scattering around me. My parents hadn't just moved the safe. They had used the physical bearer bonds, the original property deeds, and the forged power of attorney documents, which my father had carefully crafted using my signatures from old estate management paperwork I had blindly signed during my deep grief to systematically dismantle Maya's trust. They had liquidated a massive portion of her inheritance. They hadn't just spent $80,000 on a home theater. They had stolen over $400,000 to pay off their massive country club debts, purchase a luxury SUV that was currently parked in the club parking lot, and fund their extravagant new lifestyle. They had treated my dead husband's sacred gift to his daughter as their personal piggy bank. The betrayal shattered me into a million jagged pieces. I sat on the floor of my father's office, clutching the proof of their theft to my chest, and cried tears of pure, unadulterated agony. The people who had held me while I wept for my husband had robbed his orphaned daughter. They had looked at Maya's beautiful, innocent face every Sunday, kissed her cheeks, and then gone downstairs to build a monument to their greed using her future. How could you? I choked out into the empty room, my voice broken, my heart completely destroyed. How could you do this to your own grandchild? The pain quickly burned into something else. It was a cold, hard, terrifyingly clear anger. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a fierce, maternal protective instinct. They thought I was weak. They thought because I was a grieving widow who relied on them for emotional support, I would never question them. They thought they had committed the perfect, victimless crime, believing they could somehow replace the money before I noticed, or perhaps they simply didn't care. But they had made one fatal mistake. They forgot who David was, and they forgot what David had left behind. You see, My parents thought they had stolen the real treasure when they took the physical bearer bonds and the primary deeds from a safe. But David was a master accountant. He was a man who never put all his eggs in one basket, and he certainly never trusted a single physical location. I left their house quietly, taking the incriminating folder with me. I drove home, my mind working at a feverish pace. I went straight to my master bedroom closet. Deep in the back, inside a hollowed-out old sewing machine that belonged to my grandmother, was a small, dusty black USB drive. David had given it to me weeks before he died. If anything ever happens to the physical papers, Clara, he had told me, plug this into a secure computer. It contains the real books, the digital ledgers. I had never opened it because I never thought I'd need to. I plugged the USB into my laptop. A password prompt appeared. I typed in Maya's full name and date of birth. The screen flashed, and a massive, highly encrypted financial tracking system materialized before my eyes. David hadn't just created a trust. He had created a mirrored digital accounting ledger that tracked every single movement of the funds in real time. Every transaction my father had made, every unauthorized liquidation, every forged signature had been flagged by the system and recorded on this secure cloud-based server. Furthermore, David had embedded a legal clause within the trust structure, a clause my parents' cheap estate lawyer had completely overlooked. The clause stated that any unauthorized attempt to liquidate or transfer funds by anyone other than the primary trustee, myself, would automatically trigger a legal freeze on all connected accounts, and it would immediately execute a hidden financial countermeasure. It would recall the funds from the perpetrator's personal assets, legally converting their own property into collateral for the trust. In simpler terms, by stealing $400,000 from Maya, my parents had unknowingly signed over the legal rights to their own home, their bank accounts, and all their personal assets to Maya's trust if the stolen fund were not replaced within 30 days of discovery. And the digital ledger had already logged the discovery the moment my father executed the forged power of attorney. The 30-day clock was already running down. They had less than a week left. I sat back in my chair, staring at the glowing screen. A dark, cinematic resolve washed over me. They wanted a show. They wanted to live like high society royalty. They wanted to use my daughter's life to buy their friends' admiration. I wasn't going to scream at them. I wasn't going to confront them in tears and beg for the money back. They didn't deserve my tears. They deserved justice. I picked up the phone and called my parents. My voice was smooth, completely devoid of the anger burning inside me. "Hi, Mom," I said, sounding cheerful. "Hey, I was thinking, since your gorgeous new home theater is finally finished, we should celebrate. Why don't you invite your new friends from the country club, the Harrisons, and whoever else you want to impress, for a grand opening night this Friday? I'll bring Maya, and I'll even prepare a special video presentation to honor you and Dad for everything you've done for us since David passed." On the other end of the line, I could hear my mother's audible gasp of delight. "Oh, Clara, that is a marvelous idea. The Harrisons have been dying to see it. And a video presentation? That's so sweet of you. It will really show everyone what a tight-knit, successful family we are." "Yes," I whispered, a cold smile spreading across my face. "It will show everyone exactly who we are." Until everything changed that Friday night, they truly believed they had gotten away with it. They were walking on air, completely unaware that the trap was already set, and they were about to walk right into it. The night of the grand opening arrived. My parents' house was illuminated like a five-star resort. Valet drivers, paid for with my daughter's stolen money, were parking luxury sports cars along the curb. Women in elegant evening gowns and men in tailored suits poured through the front door, laughing and sipping champagne. My mother was in her element, wearing a diamond necklace that I had never seen before, floating through the crowd like a queen. My father stood by the bar, loudly boasting about his financial acumen and his brilliant investment strategies. Maya and I arrived dressed elegantly. Maya held my hand, completely unaware of the storm that was about to break. I looked at my parents, who greeted us with warm, theatrical hugs. "Clara, darling, you look beautiful," my mother gushed, kissing my cheek. "Are you ready for the big screening? Everyone is so excited to see the theater." "I'm completely ready, Mom," I said, my voice steady, my eyes locked onto hers. It's going to be an unforgettable night. Around 8 p.m., my father clinked his glass with a silver spoon, gathering everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would please follow us down to the lower level. It's time for the official unveiling of the Grand Elite Theater. The crowd cheered and filed down the stairs. The basement was breathtaking. The leather seats were plush, the ambient blue lighting was cinematic, and the air carried the scent of elite luxury. The guests took their seats, filling the rows, murmuring in admiration. The Harrisons sat in the front row, visibly impressed. My parents took their seats right in the center, beaming with absolute pride. I stood at the back of the room, near the control console, where I had plugged in my own USB drive earlier under the guise of setting up my tribute video. My father stood up one last time, addressing the crowd. Before we watch our feature film, my daughter Clara has put together a small presentation, a tribute to family, legacy, and the success that binds us. Enjoy. The lights dimmed to pitch black. The crowd fell silent. The massive screen flickered to life, but it didn't show photos of our family vacations. It didn't show sweet videos of Maya growing up. Instead, the words "the real cost of luxury" appeared on the screen in stark, bold white letters against a black background. A collective murmur went through the audience. I saw my mother stiffen in her seat. The next slide displayed a crystal-clear, high-definition scan of David's original trust fund document for Maya, highlighting the balance of $4.7 million. The narrator's voice, my own voice, pre-recorded, cold and cinematic, echoed through the state-of-the-art speakers. Legacy is a sacred trust. When my husband died, he left behind a future for our daughter. He trusted that family would protect it. The screen flashed. Suddenly, bank transaction records materialized. Huge red arrows pointed from Maya's trust account directly into my father's personal checking account. The dates were clear. The amounts were staggering. $50,000 for country club back dues. $85,000 for a luxury SUV. And right there, highlighted in bright yellow, $82,400 to the Home Theater Design Group. What is this? Is this a joke? Mr. Harrison muttered from the front row. My father stood up, his face completely pale, his eyes wide with horror. Clara, turn this off. What are you doing? Sit down, Arthur, someone in the back whispered, fascinated by the unfolding drama. The video didn't stop. The next slide showed a massive, high-resolution comparison of my father's signature next to a forged signature of my name on the liquidation documents. An animated forensic handwriting analysis overlay appeared on the screen, matching his handwriting perfectly, displaying the word "forgery detected" in flashing red text. The room became so silent you could hear a pin drop. The country club elites were staring at the screen, then at my parents, their mouths agape. My mother looked like she was going to faint. She clutched her diamond necklace, her face twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated shame and terror. But greed has a price. My pre-recorded voice continued calmly over the speakers. According to the legal clauses embedded within the trust, unauthorized liquidation triggers an immediate asset seizure to protect the orphan's inheritance. The final slide appeared on the screen. It was a copy of a legal foreclosure notice, officially stamped by the court and filed just 4 hours ago. It displayed my parents' home address. Asset seizure termination notice. Total amount owed, $402,000. Due date, expired today at 5 p.m. Ownership of this property, this home, and all connected personal assets has legally transferred to the Maya Sterling Trust Fund. Eviction notice effective in 72 hours. The lights in the theater snapped back on. The silence was deafening. My parents were frozen in their luxury leather seats, surrounded by the very people they had destroyed their souls to impress. The Harrisons slowly stood up, looking at my parents with absolute disgust. "Arthur, Eleanor, how could you?" Mrs. Harrison whispered, shaking her head before walking toward the stairs. Within 2 minutes, the entire room emptied out. The high society friends fled the house like rats leaving a sinking ship, leaving my parents sitting alone in their multi-thousand-dollar theater. My mother burst into frantic, hysterical tears, dropping to her knees. Clara, how could you do this to us? In front of everyone. You ruined our lives. You exposed us. I walked down the steps of the theater, looking down at her, my face entirely serene. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt nothing but a profound, unshakable peace. I didn't ruin your lives, Mom. I said softly, my voice echoing in the empty, expensive room. Your greed did. You sold my daughter's future for leather seats and a projector. You thought because David was gone, she was unprotected. But he is still protecting her. And so am I. My father put his head in his hands, weeping silently. They had wanted the world to see them as wealthy, successful, and elite. Instead, the world saw them exactly for what they were, thieves who robbed their own flesh and blood. They were forced to sell their luxury SUV and liquidate their remaining personal assets to pay back every single penny stolen from the trust, plus interest, just to avoid criminal prosecution, which I offered to waive only if they signed the house over without a legal fight. They now live in a tiny, rented one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, completely cut off from the high society world that rejected them, and completely cut off from the daughter and grandchild who once loved them. I kept the house, not for myself, but as a rental property whose monthly income goes directly into Maya's college fund. As I sit on my porch today, watching Maya laugh as she plays in the backyard, I realize that true wealth isn't found in luxury home theaters, country club memberships, or flashy appearances. True wealth is honor. It is loyalty. It is the peace of mind that comes from knowing you protected the ones who trusted you. My parents wanted a cinematic life, but they forgot that in every great story, justice always finds a way to write the final chapter.